الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. طيب. So tonight we're going to take a little break from the topic of Muslim morals and manners, the subtopic of interpersonal relationships, and the subtopic of relations between Muslims. It's kind of a break, it's kind of not a break, because what I'm going to talk about tonight does have some relevance as it relates to these interpersonal relationships and how we deal with other Muslims. But because of the way the class ended last week, I felt like it was important to deal with a particular topic. And I want to make it clear that what we're going to present tonight is by no means an attempt to push back, but rather what I saw unfold just felt to me like an opportunity wa alaikum salam, to teach. There was an issue that we should learn about, we should have a good understanding about, because it does impact how we interact with each other. And it's critical. I kind of touched on it toward the end last week. Wanted to expand on it, make it clear. And then if there's any need for discussion or dialogue, we can have that. So basically, what I wanted to talk about tonight was the topic of al-khilaf, or al-ikhtilaf. Differences of opinion, differing in Islam. It's an important topic because, generally speaking, if we don't study it and have a good knowledge of it, we don't know how to deal with it in the community, and it causes a lot of problems. So, first of all, I have a few points that we're going to use to guide the discussion. So the first point is, al-khilaf amrun qad qadahu Rabbul Alameen. That basically differences of opinion, this is a matter which Allah has decreed. And if Allah decrees something, it means it's what? It's bound to happen. There's no stopping it. There's no way to get around it. It's going to happen because Allah willed it. Allah decreed it. Okay? And there's no way that we can prevent the occurrence of Allah's decree. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, وَلَا يَزَالُونَ مُخْتَلِفِينَ إِلَّا مَنْ رَحِمَ رَبُّكَ. He says, and they will not cease to differ. They will not cease to differ and dispute and disagree amongst themselves, except those whom your Lord has shown mercy. So that tells you right there, it's going to happen. What's that? That ayah is at the end of Surah Hud, if I'm not mistaken. I'll give you the number. Just let's cut them to. Jibril, could you give me a Quran, an English one, or an Arabic one? Doesn't matter really. To be honest with you, give me an Arabic one. I'll give you the ayah. All right, one second.
You said it's toward the end?
Yeah, hold on one second. I'll find it for you. Yeah, it's Surah Hud, verse 119. All right, Surah Hud, verse 119. طيب. So, in this verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes it clear that people will differ and they will not cease to differ. It's something that's going to happen. It's going to occur. We also have the hadith in which the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, لا تزال طائفة من أمتي على الحق ظاهرين لا يضرهم من خذلهم ولا من خالفهم حتى يأتي أمر الله وهم على ذلك. So he said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, there will not cease to be a faction, a group from my ummah upon the truth, ظاهرين. لا يضرهم من خذلهم. They will not be harmed by those who betray them. وَلَا مَنْ خَالَفَهُمْ, and they will not be harmed by those who disagree with them, dispute with them. حَتَّى يَأْتِي أَمْرُ اللَّهِ وَهُمْ عَلَى ذَلِكَ, until the command of Allah, the day of judgment comes, and they are still what? Upon the truth, not harmed by those who dispute with them. We also have the hadith, the famous hadith, in which the Prophet ﷺ, he said, إِنَّهُ مَنْ يَعِشْ مِنْكُمْ فَسَيَرَى اخْتِلَافًا كَثِيرًا. He says, indeed, whoever lives long amongst you is going to see much differing and disputation and disagreements. And we also have the hadith, famous hadith, in which the Prophet ﷺ, he said, تفرقت اليهود والنصارى على 72 ملة وستفترق أمتي هذه على 73 ملة. He said that the Jews and Christians, they split up. They had these differences about theology, about practice, and as a result of that, they divide into what? 72 sects. And this ummah will also have its what? Its differences. And as a consequence, will divide up into what? 73 sects. طيب. So all of this teaches us what? Teaches us that differences of opinion is going to happen. It's going to occur. طيب. The second point is that even though Allah has decreed it, He's willed it, it's going to happen, la mahala, it doesn't mean that He's pleased with it. And we have to be clear on this. Allah doesn't like it when we what? When we dispute, when we disagree. He doesn't like it. And don't be surprised. Don't say to yourself, well, how can Allah decree something that He doesn't like? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because of a wisdom that He has that we can't always fathom and comprehend, He decrees things that He's not pleased with, that He doesn't like. So for example, He created Iblis, knowing that Iblis would do what? Would spread corruption and mischief in the earth. Okay, He's not pleased with that, but He willed it. He decreed it. He also decreed that some of the Anbiya would be assassinated. Some of the Anbiya will be assassinated. Allah doesn't love this, but He decreed it. He willed it. He also decreed and willed that ma'asi, sins, wickedness, corruption would do what? Would spread. The earth is filled with it, but He's not pleased with it. So sometimes Allah, because of a wisdom that He has, and we don't always comprehend, He wills something that He doesn't love and He's not pleased with, but He wills it. And we know this is the case because Allah said in the ayah that we mentioned previously, إِلَّا مَنْ رَحِمَ رَبُّكَ, except those whom your Lord has shown mercy. So He willed it, but the people that do it, He's not pleased with them. Why? Because He says they're not the people that I've shown my mercy. I've deprived them of my mercy. We also have the ayah in Surah An-Nisa. I want to say it's the 59th verse, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِن تَنَازَعْتُمْ فِي شَيْءٍ فَرُدُّوهُ إِلَّهِ وَالرَّسُولِ إِن كُنتُمْ تُؤْمِنُونَ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ. He says, and if you differ, O Muslims, amongst yourselves, then refer that difference back to Allah and to His Messenger. Notice, if Allah was pleased with it, He wouldn't tell us what? To refer it back. To do something to what? To resolve it, to sort it out. He wouldn't tell us to do that if He was pleased with it. He would say, if you differ, what's the big deal? No. But He told us, if you differ, then try to what? Resolve your differences. Go back to the Quran and the Sunnah. We also have the hadith, and I want you to pay attention to this hadith. Hadith of Bukhari Muslim on the third of Jundub ibn Abd'Llah, in which the Prophet said, pay attention to this hadith. He said, اقرأوا القرآن ما ائتلفت عليه قلوبكم فإذا اختلفتم فقوموا عنه. He said, O Muslims, read the Quran. And when he said read the Quran, he meant what? Read it together in groups. ما ائتلفت عليه قلوبكم. As long as your hearts are united about its meaning, how it's supposed to be read, and its interpretation. فإذا اختلفتم. But if you start to what? Differ, فَقُومُوا عَنْهُ, then stop reading it and disperse. I want you to think about this for a minute. Is there a dhikr better than the Quran? There are very few ways to get closer to Allah than by reading the Quran. It's the word of Allah. But the Prophet is telling us, if the word of Allah causes you to what? Dispute, then stop reading the word of Allah and disperse. So this tells you how seriously Islam takes what? Differing. To the point that if a good deed will cause you to differ and dispute, you should what? Stop doing that good deed. So it shows you Allah is not pleased with what? Differences and disputation. So that was the second point. The third point is that all differences are not created equal. All differences are not created equal. So we shouldn't think that every difference is the same. But they're different type of differences. There are different types, different levels, and each level has its what? Its ruling. But the first type is ikhtilafun lafzi, what we call semantic differences. You guys know what semantic means? Semantic differences? It's like, for example, two people use two different words to refer to the same thing. And so when this one uses this word and this one uses this word, they think that what? You're opposing me. You're opposing me. That's not right. So for example, in fiqh terminology, we have two terms. Mustahab and mandub. Mustahab and mandub. They both basically, and we have a concept that you have a deed that if you do it, you get a reward. And if you don't do it, you're not sinful. You have the option. We have this concept. So one faqih, one specialist in fiqh will call this concept, he'll refer to it as mustahab. And the other will refer to it as what? Mandub. And they'll think that what? So for example, they'll take something like, for example, they'll take, for example, the dua that we say after the adhan. And one will say, this dua is mustahab. And they'll say, la. And mustahab is what? Mandub. And they'll start to dispute about who's right and who's wrong, when in reality they're both saying the same thing. That it's something that if you do it, you'll get a reward, and if you don't do it, you won't be punished. It's what? So their khilaf, their difference of opinion is what? Lafzi. It's just what? Semantic. Semantic difference. I call it mustahab, you call it mandub. At the end of the day, we both agree it's something if you do it, you get a reward. If you don't do it, you won't be punished. But similar to this is when the scholars of tafsir, when they made tafsir of as-sirat al-mustaqim, the straight path. Some of them said it's Islam, someone said it's the Quran, someone said it's the Sunnah, right? They gave all these different words which really mean what? The same thing, al-haq, the truth. They all mean by that, the truth. It's just a different way of expressing the truth. So this khilaf is khilafun lafzi, not khilafun ma'nawi. It doesn't have a real, it's not a real tangible difference. But the second type of khilaf is khilafun or ikhtilafun la fa'idata minhu. You have a difference which there's no what? There's no real benefit in it. There's no real benefits. For example, the scholars in the past, they used to argue. Who's better? The angels or those human beings who are righteous and upright? As-salihin. Which one's better? So some of them would say the angels are better, because they don't commit sin. And the others would say, no, the humans are better. Why? Because they have the ability to sin, but they don't. And so they would what? Debate. At the end of the day, I'm going to ask you honestly, what's the fa'idah? What's the benefit? What do you benefit from that? Who's better? What's the benefit? At the end of the day, it's not going to raise you what? In rank. It's not going to get you closer to Allah. In fact, if you dispute, it could what? It could cause you harm because Allah doesn't like disputation. Like, the third type of disputation or differences is ikhtilaf at-tanawwu'. And this is basically differences which are in reality permissible variations. Differences which are in reality permissible variations. Like what? Like in the Quran, we have something called al-qira'at. Al-qira'at, the modes of recitation. So you'll have more than one way to recite what? An ayah, or a word in an ayah, or a letter in a word in an ayah. There'll be different ways to recite it, and all of them are what? Permissible. They're just variations. They're not really differences. So for example, in Surah Takwir, we have the verse in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, He says, وَمَا صَاحِبُكُمْ وَمَا هُوَ, I'm sorry, وَمَا هُوَ عَلَى الْغَيْبِ بِضَنِينٍ. وَمَا هُوَ عَلى الْغَيْبِ بِضَنِينٍ. So this verse can be recited two ways. Baneen, the bad, and Dhaneen, the va. Al-Dhaneen means he's not what? Bakhil. He's not stingy. Meaning he doesn't keep anything from you. Allah reveals to him and he says, okay, I'm going to tell you this, but I'm going to keep this for myself. No, the Prophet tells you everything Allah gave him. He's not bakhil. Al-Dhaneen means someone who his credibility is in question. And so both of these meanings are what? Acceptable, and they're just permissible variations of the same verse in the Quran. This is what we call ikhtilafat an-nawwa. Similar to this is what? Sifat al-adhan. The different ways you can make the adhan. There are like 4 different what? Ways to make the adhan. All of them are what? Permissible variations. Okay? Some of the companions did it this way, some did it that way, and they were all what? Taught by who? By Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Another example is dua al-istiftah. That when you open the prayer, there's different ways what? To open the prayer. And all of them are what? Permissible variations of what? Of dua al-istiftah, the opening supplication for the prayer. طيب. The 4th type, and this is the most important one, that's what we call ikhtilaf al-tabad. Irreconcilable differences. You got 2 differences which what? There's no way to what? Reconcile them. If you say this, then you have to what?
Leave that.
You have to, exactly. If you say this, you have to what? Leave that. They both can't be what? They can't be right at the same time. So an example of ikhtilaf at-tabad would be if one scholar says halal. Another one says what? Haram. One says yajuz. The other one says la. Yajuz. One says sunnah. The other one says bid'ah. They can't be sunnah and bid'ah at what? Same time. Halal, haram, same time. It's impossible. Ikhtilaf at-tabad. Irreconcilable. If you say this, you have to leave that, and vice versa. But this ikhtilaf at-tabad is 2 types. Or it's divided into 2 levels, if you will. The first one is ikhtilafun fi masail yasugh al-khilafu fiha. You have a person who differs, irreconcilable difference, but in an issue in which differing is what? It's permitted. Differing is permitted. The second one, guess what it is?
No.
Differing in a matter or matters in which difference of opinion are not permitted. So sometimes what happens is the Muslims, they differ, irreconcilable differences in matters which what? It's permissible for them to differ. And sometimes they differ in matters in which there's no differences of opinion are permitted. And those are 2 different levels of the same what? Ikhtilaf at-tabad, irreconcilable differences. But how do you know if it's from the first category? That difference where it's permitted. Well, what you do is you look to what? The Sahaba, the companions, and al-Qurun al-Mufaddala. Those 3 generations which are considered the golden standard of Islam. If they differed, then differing is what? Permissible. If they differed about the issue, then differing is permissible because they're the gold standard. Especially, provided that when they differed, one of them wouldn't consider the other one bal, misguided, astray. So they differed, and they didn't consider the one who differed with them astray. Those 2 conditions are there. We know it's what? Ikhtilafun, which is what? Permitted. It's acceptable khilaf. So the second one then, the unacceptable khilaf, which would be if they didn't differ. Or if they considered the one who differed with them to be what? Bad, if he was astray.
So when you say didn't figure that the Sahaba was astray, what about when they had one of the Sahabas heard the different huruf?
Huh?
Bring them to the Prophet.
The huruf, you mean the qira'at?
Yeah, when he heard
Umar.
Yeah.
But then the Prophet basically said, he told him to read. He said, read, Ya Umar. So Umar read. And then when the other person, he said, okay, now you read. And he read. And he said, it was revealed this way, Ya Umar. He said, both these ways are correct. And that teaches you that there's a such thing as what? These permissible variations. Ikhtilafat an-nawwa. And all of them are right as long as what? As long as it came from Rasulullah. Yeah. طيب. All right, so now we go to the 4th point. and this is the most important point. How do we deal with these differences now? How do we deal with each one of these differences? What's the ruling of it? How do we interact with it? How do we deal with it? طيب. The first one is lafzi. We go back to khilaf lafzi, semantic differences. How do we deal with those? La mushaha fil istilah. That we don't basically harp on what? Differences in what? In words. We don't harp on the semantic differences. If we're both saying the same thing, then I'm not going to argue you down because you use mandub and I like to use mustahab. At the end of the day, are we saying that this thing is something that if you do it, you'll get a reward, and if you leave it, you won't be punished? Yeah, we're saying that. You can call it whatever. You can call it car if you want. You can call it carpet if you want. You can call it stick. You can call it anything. As long as we're saying the same thing. As long as we mean the same thing. But the second one is you have those differences in which there's no benefit in the difference. At the end of the day, even if you agree, there won't be any benefit from it. So in that case, we should do what? Leave the khilaf. Because as Abd'Llah ibn Mas'ud was reported to have said in Bukhari, he said, al-khilaf kulluhu shar. He said, differing, all of it is what? Is evil. Muslims should try their best not to differ, not to dispute. So if there's something that we're discussing, and you say it's this way, and I say it's that way, whether it's something got to do with the world or something got to do with the deen, if there's no benefit in having that argument or that dispute, then you do what? You just leave it. It's pointless. It's pointless. And there could be harm, but there's not going to be any benefit. But the third one is ikhtilaf at-tanawwu'. We talked about those permissible variations. This itself should never be considered khilaf, aslan. You shouldn't even consider it what? A difference, aslan. And it definitely shouldn't be something which causes what? Hard feelings and ill will between brothers and sisters in Islam. This person makes this dua for istiftah, you make this dua. There's different types of tashahhud. Different types of tashahhud, the closing supplication. This person makes this one, you make that one. As long as it came from the Messenger of Allah, it's what? It's right. It can't be wrong. It can't be, for example, this is what we do in my country, so it's got to be no. If the Prophet said it, if the Prophet taught it, it's right. It's part of the deen. But last but not least, and this is the most important one, at-tabad. That you have these irreconcilable differences in matters in which what? Differences of opinion are permissible. How do we deal with those? Okay? What I want to do here is I want to read to you the statement of two imams of our time, two contemporary scholars, and how they said the companions of the Messenger of Allah used to deal with these differences. Because that's our example. They're our role model. If we do as they do, we'll be successful. If we do otherwise, we won't be successful. But first of all, the first imam is an Imam al-Albani, rahimahullah ta'ala. And he says, as for the differing of the Muslims of the early period, that was unavoidable. Natural difference of understanding. They did not differ by choice. This type of differing is impossible to totally remove. It's going to happen. Then he says, the companions, despite their well-known differing in non-fundamental issues, were extremely careful to preserve outward unity, staying well away from anything that would divide them and split their ranks. They didn't argue, debate, or become excessively agitated. For example, there were among them those who approved of saying the basmalah loudly in prayer, and those who did not. There were those who held that raising the hands in prayer was recommended, and those who did not. There were those who held that touching a woman nullified ablution, and those who did not. But despite all of that, they would all pray together behind one imam, and none of them would abstain from praying behind the imam due to a difference of opinion. But the second imam is the Sheikh al-Imam Muhammad ibn Salih al-Uthaymeen. And he says, as for the approach of the pious predecessors, it is from the fundamental principles of the Muslims committed to the Sunnah and unity in matters of contention, those in which differences are caused by ijtihad. What does he mean by ijtihad? Independent reasoning and analytical perspective. So basically, you have issues where the ruling is not clear. So you have to do what? You have to think about it, ponder it, and try to reason out what was intended or what the ruling should be. So he says that they would excuse one another and refrain from having any hard feelings, enmity, or resentment towards one another. Instead, they would consider themselves brothers and treat each other as such in spite of these differences, to the extent that one of them would pray behind another, whom he considered to be in a state of impurity. He would consider the prayer behind that imam to be valid, even though, in his opinion, if he prayed alone in the same state, his prayer would be invalid. So he's praying behind the imam, who in his madhab, in his mind, his prayer is invalid. But because in that imam's mind, his prayer is what? Valid. He prays behind him and says what? My prayer is valid. But if he were in the same state, praying by himself, he would say, my prayer is unacceptable. Okay? He goes on to say, that is because they considered that differences in matters in which differences of opinion are permitted, rooted in ijtihad, and we said ijtihad is what? That analytical perspective, deductive reasoning, are not in reality differences, because each of those holding a contending view has followed what is required of him to follow from the proofs that one is not permitted to disregard. You guys understand that? So he says basically, shuf. He says, okay, you say that your prayer is valid, I say your prayer is invalid. Why do you say that? The person says, I say that because Allah said, or because his messenger said. He gives what? His proof. So they would say, if you're following the proof, if you're supporting what you say with proof, then in my mind, we're not really differing, because you have to follow the proof. But what the reality is, you're following the proof as you see it, as you understand it. And I do understand, acknowledge that what? We're not always going to what? See things the same way. But what's fundamentally required is that you follow what? The proof. You're not following what? Your desires. Okay? It's like this because I say so. No, it's like this because Allah said. Okay, well that verse, I don't understand the way you understand it, but at least what? You're following the proof. So then he says, so they consider that if their fellow Muslim differed with them in a matter, while following the evidence, some text or valid principle to which he clings, then he has in reality agreed with them, because they call to the following of the evidence wherever it may be. So what's their fundamental message? When Ahl Sunnah, when they set out, they make a quest to find the truth in a matter, and somebody else is right there with them, side by side, trying to find the truth in that matter. At the end of the day, do they want that person to agree with them, or do they want that person to follow the dalil? That's what they want. I don't want you to agree with me. I just want you to follow the dalil. Are you following the dalil? Yeah, I'm following the dalil. Then what? I'm satisfied. Even if the result that I make, that I reach, or the conclusion I reach is not the same as the conclusion you reach. Because what matters to them is following the dalil, not you agreeing with me, basically. Like, think about that. I'm going to give you a practical example of this. It's a hadith, collected by Bukhari and Muslim, on the authority of Abd'Llah ibn Umar, in which he said, the Prophet ﷺ said on the day of the Confederates, al-Ahzab. You guys know the battle of the trench, the battle of al-Ahzab. Basically, the Prophet's companions were under siege by this confederation of different tribes that basically came together to basically annihilate the Muslims. And they caught them in a state where they really couldn't go out to the enemy, or they thought it was a better strategy not to go out to the enemy, but rather to entrench themselves within the confines of Medina. So what they did was they dug what? They dug a trench, okay? And these people had never seen this type of warfare. So what they ended up doing was set up their camp outside of the trench. And there were like a few skirmishes, but there was never any real what? Real battle. Because they couldn't really cross the trench. It was something new. So they went off to what? Strategize. And there were a few days that passed. Ultimately what happened is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put ru'b. He put fear in their hearts. And it got real cold. And they ended up what? Dispersing. But what had happened in the course of that is that the Prophet had agreed previously with the Jews of Al-Madinah that if any enemy came to fight the people of Medina, that they would fight with the Muslims. But what they did instead was what? They betrayed the Muslims. They went to these confederates and they promised to give them secrets, probably give them access to Medina and so on and so forth. Allah revealed it. Okay? Can't hide anything from Allah. So when Allah revealed it, the Prophet went after the confederates had dispersed. He went back, he took off his armor and he was getting ready to take a bath. And Jibreel came to him and he said, "Are you taking off your armor?" The Prophet said, "Yeah, the battle is over." So Jibreel said, "I'm going to take off my armor and the other angels are going to take off their armor until we march to Bani Qurayza, until we meet them, until we rout them, because they betrayed us." So then the Prophet ﷺ understood from this was a command from Allah to go and what? Fight Bani Qurayza. So he went and he assembled the Muslims and he said to them, لا يصلين أحد, he said, لا يصلين أحدكم إلا في بني قريظة. He said, go forth, march to Bani Qurayza, and don't let one of you pray Salat al-Asr until he reaches there. So Bani Qurayza is what? It's a musafa. It's like there's a distance to travel. It's not like close by. Okay? But the Prophet is saying, go to Bani Qurayza, make haste, and don't pray Asr until you get there. So they set out. The Muslims set out. And they get there, or they're on their way, and the time for prayer comes in and it's getting ready to go out. They're afraid that we're not going to make it there in time before Salat al-Asr expires. So they got to disputing amongst themselves. So a group of them said that the Prophet ﷺ said not to pray al-Asr until we get to Bani Qurayza. Okay? That's what he said. That's the literal meaning of what he said. We're going to do exactly what he said. The literal meaning, we're not going to pray until we reach Bani Qurayza. Even if what? If we miss the time. Because that's what the Prophet said. The other group, they said, no. We should pray. Because the Prophet didn't want for us not to pray. He just wanted us to make haste. I know that's what he said, but that's not what he meant. So one of them was what? Clinging to what? Clinging to what he said. The other was clinging to what they thought he meant. But they were both following what? The dalil. They were both following the dalil. None of them said, well, I think, I feel, if you ask me. No, they were both following the dalil. But one of them looked at the same dalil from the point of view of what? The intended meaning. The other looked at it from the point of view of what? The literal words. Literal words. So they differed. Some of them prayed, the others didn't pray. In some of the riwayat, some of the verses of the hadith, they didn't pray until after the sun set. They got to Bani Qurayza and it was always what? It was already Maghrib. And they prayed Salat al-Asr after the sun had set. When they got back to the Prophet, he was informed of what happened. وَلَمْ يَعْنِفْ عَلَى وَلَمْ يَعْنِفْ وَاحِدًا مِنْهُمْ. And he did not disapprove, criticize, correct, scold, censor anyone from amongst them. He just felt what? Quiet. As if to say what? Both of you guys did what I said. I can't blame anybody because you did what I said and you did what I said. Basically. You follow me? So there's a few lessons from this and I'll close with these lessons. The first lesson, it is not uncommon for the verse of the Quran and the hadith of Rasulullah to be open to interpretation and understood in more than one way. This is the reality of the Quran and the hadith, is that in many cases there's a verse, there's a hadith that could be interpreted more than one way. Number two, because people differ in what? Intellect, perspective, and their methods of drawing conclusions, difference of opinion occurred even amongst the Sahaba. Even the Sahaba differed. Why? Because the Sahaba themselves, because they're human, they differ in what? Intellects. Differ in what? Perspective. Differ in what? The methods they use to draw conclusions. You see it. One looked at what? Al-ma'na. What did he intend by what he said? The other one said what? This is what he said. We just go by what? The literal word. They have different what? Perspectives. So number 3. If they differ, the Sahaba, in spite of their advanced knowledge and close relationship with the Prophet ﷺ, these people walk with the Prophet. And they were born experts in the language of the Arabs. They knew the Prophet better than anyone else, so when he would say things, they were better able to interpret what he intended. You guys ever have a friend, you just knew him for like 10, 15, 20 years? Raise your hand if you have somebody like that. You have a relationship with that person to where they don't even have to say anything, or they'll say something, and you know exactly what they mean. Is that not so? They can just look a certain way, and you're like, I know what you're thinking. Isn't that true? Isn't that true? Yeah. And you have somebody else who doesn't know him like that, and they're like, what do you mean by that? I think he was saying this. No, brother. That's not what he meant. That's not, that, because you just know the person so well. So the same thing with them, they walk with the Messenger of Allah. Live with him, travel with him, ate with him. They know him like nobody else. وَمَعَ ذَلِكَ, in spite of all that, 2 groups. Oh, he said this. He meant that. You guys with me? If this happened to them, there should be no surprise when those less knowledgeable and further away from the Prophet, who didn't walk with him, didn't live with him, don't necessarily understand exactly everything he means, there should be no surprise when they do what? When they differ. So number 4. Following the literal interpretation of the Quran and Sunnah is what? It's an acceptable what? Approach. Because these people did that and the Prophet didn't criticize them. They said, that's what the Prophet said, that's what we're going to do. Even if what? The time for prayer comes and goes. Number 5. Drawing conclusions from the text by way of deductive reasoning. Analytical deduction, ijtihad. And trying to consider what was intended, the meaning, in light of other evidences, is also permitted, and it's also an acceptable what? Approach. We see that because what? The other group said, yeah, that's what he said, that's not what he meant. Because they were thinking about what? What about the hadith where the Prophet said that if a person missed al-Asr, it would be like he lost his whole family, right? And he said, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, he said, Hafidhu as-salawati wa salat al-wusta. He said, take care, look after, mind your prayer, and especially as-salat al-wusta. And what's salat al-wusta? Al-Asr. So they're thinking about all this, and yeah, the Prophet said that, but that's not what he meant. Because what? These are the evidences. This is also an acceptable approach. Number 6. Those who follow either of these approaches should not do what? Should not criticize each other. Nor should they be criticized by what? By others. Because the Prophet didn't what? He didn't criticize. These people said, this is what you said, Rasulullah. These people said, this is what you meant, Rasulullah. And he just what? He didn't say anything. He didn't say anything. So if he didn't criticize, and he's our example, then we shouldn't what? Criticize. Like number 7, last but not least, each qualified person who follows the evidences and exercises ijtihad to reach a conclusion is right. He's correct. Like this is something the scholars say a lot. They say, kullu mujtahid musib. They say every mujtahid, every person who makes ijtihad is right. But if that statement is not 100% correct, or inshallah they don't intend it like that. But what they intend, inshallah ta'ala, is that that person is what? Is not sinful. Is not sinful. That's what they mean. They don't mean that both of them can be correct. Why? Because the truth is what? Is one. When those 2 groups of the companions, when they went out, one of them prayed, one of them didn't pray. Only one of them did what the Prophet actually intended. Only one of them did what the Prophet intended. Either he intended for them to hurry up, but if the prayer is going to go out, pray. Or he intended for what? Whatever happens, don't pray until you get there. He meant one of those. One of them is correct. Only one of them can be right, but both of them can be right in the sense that they're not what? Blameworthy, sinful. And that's what, inshallah, that's what the scholars, when they say, kullu mujtahid musib. And if that's the case, if they're not blameworthy, if they're both trying to follow the dalil, then we don't blame each other. We don't blame each other. I can sit right next to a brother at the table and I can, as we say, bust it up with him, laugh and joke. And he doesn't share my opinion on hundreds of things. And he can come and tell me his opinion about something. We can sit together and he can say, yeah, you know, on this issue, this is what you should do. This is what's right. I can listen to that and I can just be what? I can be as relaxed as any human being can be. Why? Because what matters to me is you follow the dalil. If that's what you really think the dalil indicates, then there's not going to be any friction or issue between you and I. Because that's what you're mutalab bihi. That's what you're required to do. Follow the dalil. And you see this from the companions. You see this from the early Muslims. That they just didn't have this, ya ikhwan. And we shouldn't have it. And this is applicable in a sense, an indirect sense, to the whole conversation that we've been having for the last how many ever weeks or months. Our job is to foster unity. Our job is to do those things that will bring the hearts together. And to avoid those things that will create what? Friction and fragmentation and schism and ill feelings and animosity and rancor, etc. We have to be smarter than the shaitan. What the shaitan wants to do, and the Imam, he spoke about this on Friday. What the shaitan wants to do is he wants to take any little thing that you say, that you do, any thing that happens, and use it as a weapon to do what? To divide between husband and wife, brother and sister, people in the community. He wants that. He loves discord. He loves differing and disputation. He loves that people who were together become what? Apart. He loves that. And so we have to be smarter than the shaitan. We can't fall for the tricks of shaitan. Shaitan throws the bait, and we can't be the people who what? Who run after it. We can't be. And the Imam, he quoted the ayah in the ayah from Surah Al-Isra, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَقُلْ لِعِبَادِيَ كُلُّ الَّتِي هِيَ أَحْسَنُ. And say to my slaves, as you see, only that which is what? Best. A lot of people, they say, man, I can't be around people if I have to walk on eggshells. You know? If I have to watch what I say. I should just be this. No. Allah is saying, no. You should watch what you say. Notice what he said. Imam, he stressed this in the khutbah, that Allah didn't say good things. He said, say that which is what? Best. You got 8 options. Choose what? The best one. Because if you say the wrong thing to your husband, you say the wrong thing to your wife, and we talked about this last week, you can cut what? You can cut deep. And it'll never heal. Yeah, you know how you get like a wound, and it looks like it's healed, but inside it's not healed? That's how it is. And as soon as something happens, that scab, that weak scab just gets what? Slapped away, and there's the wound all over again. It's like you got to be careful what you say. Now, if this is the case with your husband and wife, and they have this what very strong bond, how about people who their bond is what? It's fragile, it's weak. Your brother in the mosque, he doesn't know you that well. Okay? Doesn't interact with that much. So you got to really be careful what? How you deal with that. Treat them with what? With kid gloves. These relationships are fragile. And we need to do what we can to strengthen them. That's why if you look in the hadith, you find so many things that the Prophet said, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. Why? Because the potential it has of what? Of causing friction, causing hatred and enmity between brothers. So for example, he said in the hadith, he said, إِذَا كُنْتُمْ ثَلَاثًا فَلَا يَتَنَاجِي إِثْنَانِ دُونَ صَاحِبِهِمَا فَإِنَّ ذَلِكَ يُحْسِنُ. He said, if you're 3 people, then don't let 2 of you go off and start what? Whispering. Excluding what? The 3rd person. Because that will do what? It will cause them a lot of anxiety. You know what the problem about anxiety? They're talking about me. They're talking about me. And the shaitan's going to take that. He's going to take that. They're talking about you, man. You know, they're saying bad things about you. They're probably calling you this name, probably calling you that name, probably your ethnicity, with your mother, with your father. The shaitan's going to do what? Going to feed on that. And that person's going to do what? He's going to start to what? See red. And he's going to hate those guys. And they probably were just talking about something that's what? Something that's an affair of theirs that they need to what? To discuss. But the shaitan will jump on this. The Prophet said, don't do this because of what? The potential. And Ibn Rajab in Jami' al-Ulum wal-Hikam, he mentions a number of these similar texts. And he says, what this teaches us is that we as Muslims have been prohibited from doing anything that will cause what? Disunity. And we've been instructed to do everything we can to create what? harmony and accord, to bring ourselves what? Together. So I just wanted to share this with you all because it's important. Because we're going to live with this every day of our lives for the rest of our lives as Muslims in a Muslim community. The person you sit across from, the person you pray next to, is not going to agree with you on everything. And when you differ, you need to know what? Where to put those differences. And then how to what? How to behave so you can do what? Bring the hearts together and not cause division amongst yourselves. That was what I wanted to share. Are there any questions, comments, or complaints, or critiques? Atfadal.
I know you were saying about the scholars. I want to ask about you a class like who are the scholars and who you take your knowledge from, because a lot of them see these guys on YouTube and think they have ilm, and you know, so they get to differentiate who is who and who's not.
But what I'll say is this, because that's a common question that comes up, and people they have different ways of answering it. Some people answer with names, so they just give you a list of names. I don't believe in that. I don't believe in giving names. Why? Because a person will be on truth today, be on falsehood tomorrow. And if this video, who knows, a year from now, a person I'll name will be upon falsehood. But this video, somebody will see it a year from now and say, oh, okay, this person is a good person to take from. So I think we have to be people of principles, not personalities. I don't care about the name. I care about what the person stands for and what he stands upon. So if we know the truth, we'll know how to recognize what? The people of truth and the scholars of truth. That's basically it. I mean, there's some fundamental things that we talked about this previously. There's certain signs, certain features, certain qualities of a scholar. So, for example, one, he has teachers. You know, he has a senate. He has people who he took from people all the way back to who? Rasulullah. He's not a person who said, I took from my books. I just gathered a bunch of books and started reading them. I'm an autodidact. I'm a self-taught, you know. I read ilm for dummies. I read that from cover to cover, and now I'm a scholar. Or scholarship for dummies. No, we don't. That's not how it works. Another thing, a scholar is what? He's on a flip-flop. Is that a person who what? He has a madhab today, a different madhab tomorrow. Or a madhab depending on who he's in front of. If I'm in front of the liberals, I'm a liberal scholar. Everything's halal. If I'm in front of the conservatives, I'm a conservative scholar. Everything's haram. No, he's not a flip-flopper. As Ibn Mas'ud, one of the tabi'in came to me and said, Adly. So give me some advice. So Ibn Mas'ud, he said, do you have some doubt? He said, no, I don't doubt, but I just want what? I just want some advice. So Ibn Mas'ud, he said, إِيَّاكَ وَتَلَوُّنَ فِي الدِّينِ. He said, beware of what? Being a flip-flopper. A person who what? Like a chameleon. Okay? فَإِنَّ دِينَ اللَّهِ وَاحِدٌ. Because the religion of Allah is what? Is one. So I mean, there's just certain qualities. It's another quality. Also, a scholar is the person who what? He doesn't call to himself. He calls to what? Allah and His Messenger. So he's not telling you, I think, I feel, if you ask me, well, that makes sense, doesn't it? In my opinion. No. He's telling you what? Allah said, His Messenger said. So these are certain signs by which you'll know what? The people of truth. But as far as names, I don't get down like that. That's not how I go about my business. So anything else? Atfadal.
Okay, I just want to point 2 points here. Is number one, the overall the اختلاف is اختلاف فقهي, is not اختلاف in tawheed. Okay, so we take that from the Bedouin when the one of the Bedouin come to Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam promised him to Jannah if he pray and pay zakah, and he didn't tell him about dua al-istiftah or all that things. Okay, so to fix our aqidah is enough for us to leave the ikhtilaf. And the other things is like there's 2 rules in fiqh. One is like دع ما يريبك إلى ما لا يريبك, and the other is جلب المصالح مقدم على جلب
دار المفاسد. دار المفاسد.
دار المفاسد مقدم على جلب المصالح. Yeah.
طيب جميل. So
English, please.
Okay, so the second part of what Ahmed said, Jazakallah khair, is he said that basically there are 2 very fundamental things that we need to pay attention to in fiqh. The first one is the statement of the Prophet when she said, leave what makes you doubt for that which does not make you doubt. And the second one is Dar al-Mafasid Muqaddam al-Jalb Masalih, which means what? Repelling or eradicating harm is always given precedence or bringing about some benefit. So basically if you have something that you're going to do and you say, hey, there's going to be some benefit in this, but there's also going to be some harm. Which one takes precedence? Avoiding the harm takes precedence for what? Bringing about the benefit. طيب, any other questions, comments, complaints, critiques? Going once? Going twice? Please pay attention to this, brothers. This is so critical. The reason why we have so many issues in the Muslim community is because we haven't wrapped our head around this. And if people start to, like I said, have hatred and rancor for things that the companions differed about, and they were like adi jiddan. It was like no big deal to them. هذا وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين.